Between April 2025 and April 2026, I gained about 6 pounds. I was 43 and walking into the most stressful professional year of my life. The scale went up. By every rule we've been handed, that's failure. Except this is a body composition experiment. And I have the DEXA scan that says the opposite happened. In that same year, I gained 12.1 pounds of lean mass, lost 6.4 pounds of fat, and cut my visceral fat by 78%, an 18.5-pound recomposition, mid 40s, highest stress year of my career. These are the healthy numbers that genuinely shock me. And today, I'll show you the actual data, side by side, and the numbers that explain how this is even possible. Because none of this was luck. It was a protocol. This is the Unfair Advantage series, where we stop talking theory and start covering my actual N-of-1 data. Last season, we built the framework. This season, I'm the experiment. Here's why this matters to us, not just me. As high-performing women over 40, we've been sold a story of managed decline. Eat less, do more cardio, accept that this is just what aging looks like. That story is about biological default. But we know that default settings are just a baseline waiting to be optimized. What we're about to cover is what happens when we treat the body like the highest stakes project we'll ever manage, with data, not vibes. And if we're just meeting, I'm Alicia Bell. I'm 44. I've tracked my macros for nearly 4,000 straight days. I lift heavy 3 days a week, and I've been getting DEXA scans for years to keep myself honest. I'm not a doctor and I'm not a trainer. I'm an executive who realized my biological bottom line required the same strategic oversight as my organization. Think of this as an executive summary of my own trial and error, just a peer sharing 4 takeaways that actually moved the needle for me. My first takeaway: the scale is the worst executive you'll ever hire. Let's start with the number many of us were taught to worship: body weight. Mine went up 5.7 pounds. If I were solely managing my body based on the bathroom scale, the way many of us have been taught to run our health off of a single metric, I would have panicked, cut calories, added cardio, undone everything. But the scale is one data point with no context. It's the employee who reports activity instead of results. Total mass up, useless on its own. Here's what the DEXA, a scan that actually separates fat from bone from muscle, showed underneath that number. Lean mass went from 102.3 to 114.4, an increase of 12 pounds. At the same time, fat mass went from 43.8 down to 37.4. 6.5 pounds of fat gone. An 18.5-pound swing in what my body is made of, hidden completely behind a scale that moved 6 pounds in the wrong direction. The business adage of what gets measured gets managed applies perfectly to our health. Optimizing our biology requires the right tracking tools. My second takeaway: I cut my visceral fat during my most stressful professional year. Now, this is the number I'm proudest of because it should have been impossible. Visceral fat, VAT, the fat wrapped around our organs, the metabolically dangerous kind, linked directly to cortisol and chronic stress. When people say stress makes us gain belly fat, this is the fat they're referring to. When I got my most recent DEXA scan back, I had to take a real pause to process the numbers. The year prior, in April of 2025, my visceral fat was 0.64 pounds. 1 year later, after navigating the absolute most stressful year of my career, that number had dropped to 0.14. That's a 78% reduction, right in the exact window when biology tells us it should have exploded. My android to gynoid ratio, the marker for where the body stores fat, dropped from 0.77 to 0.57, moving me from a higher risk pattern towards a much healthier one. Popular YouTuber Dr. Rhonda Patrick has pointed to visceral fat as one of the clearest levers on long-term health span. I was floored to see that I didn't just avoid the damage stress usually does. I reversed it while the stress was happening. Stress wasn't the variable. My protocol was the anchor. My third takeaway: one scan is a photo. Multiple scans are a strategy. A single scan can help us understand our baseline. Multiple scans can help us forecast. I've been tracking this data since 2014. And if there's one thing a decade of data proves, it's this: we can't effectively lead a biological strategy based on one moment in time. A single DEXA scan provides valuable data, but it only tells us where we are right now. Multiple scans reveal our trajectory. One gives us a position, the other gives us a direction. I want to share what this past year actually looked like for me. And let's step away from the data for a second, because I know the optimized executive narrative is easy to roll our eyes at. Honestly, this was the year I wanted to throw the whole protocol out. There were weeks I was running on 4 hours of sleep, where sticking to the boring basics felt ridiculous given everything else that was on fire. I didn't feel optimized. I felt like a burnt out professional woman holding way too many things. But that's the reality behind the numbers. I didn't maintain this routine because my year was calm. I held on to it because my year was brutal. The gym wasn't something I did after the stress. It was the tool I used to process it. And if you're in a season where the basics feel too heavy, I get it. For me, they ended up being the thing that carried the weight. My fourth and final takeaway is what actually shifted these numbers for me. So what really moved the needle? Two levers did the heavy lifting, literally, and two supported. Lever one, and if I could only keep one habit, this would be it. I shifted my workouts to center on lifting heavy. 3 days a week, focusing on progressive overload, treating strength as an asset that compounds. Adding 12 pounds of lean mass at 44 didn't happen for me by toning. It came from lifting like my goal was to build. For me, this became the primary growth driver in the gym. Everything else was just optimization on the margins. Lever two, I started protecting my protein like a non-negotiable line item. After nearly 4,000 straight days of tracking macros, I realized protein couldn't be a target that I just hit on good days. It had to be a fixed cost I paid every day. Stress or no stress. Consistently hitting my target of 150 grams a day made it possible for me to build muscle and lose fat at the same time, the definition of a recomp. Those two were my core strategy. The other two were the operational guardrails that protected the investment. First, managing sleep and stress to the best of my ability. Given that there were weeks this past year where I survived on minimal sleep, this was not about being perfect. It was about doing what I could when I could to mitigate the impact of a ruthless year. That 78% drop in visceral fat wasn't a biohacking miracle. It was the result of applying the boring basics as consistently as I could manage. Second, I prioritized measuring over guessing, using DEXA scans, tracking macros, and testing biomarkers, like the ones I broke down in the last episode. If you haven't seen that one, please go check it out, because our blood work and our body comp are really just the same story told two ways. This is the unfair advantage. And here's the whole thesis in one line. Aging is a biological default. Recomposition is an executive decision. The gap between the two is where the second half of life gets decided. And the reason most people never close that gap is because they're trying to manage their most valuable asset using bad data from a $30 bathroom scale. We run complex systems for a living. We know how to read the data, find the leverage points, and execute consistently. Most of us have simply never pointed that exact same skill set at our own biology. This isn't a fitness problem. It's a resource allocation problem. And it's the most fixable one we've got. Two questions you may already be thinking. One, I can't get a DEXA scan easily. Where do I start? Honestly, let's start with the data we already control. We can track a single day of protein intake or take an honest look at our sleep tonight. The DEXA scan is how I happen to keep score, but it's not the entry fee. If we can only change one thing this week, let's consider the protein. It's a primary driver behind both muscle gain and fat loss. The scan just gives us the receipt later. Question two, I'm over 40 and starting from zero. Is it too late for a recomp like this? The exact opposite. Every number I just shared is a trend line, and that trajectory doesn't care where our baseline is. It only cares about our direction. We don't need a time machine to completely change how our body operates. We just need to decide at exactly the age we are right now to stop accepting the default. We aren't behind. We're just at the starting line. If this reframed how you look at your own numbers, I hope you'll subscribe. This whole season is about data, not theory. And in the spirit of full transparency, there's still something eating at me. Everything I just shared, the muscle, the fat, the 78% reduction, that's just the structural data. It's the physical balance sheet. I ran the protocol, I tracked the macros, and I was thrilled with the trajectory. But there was one metric I genuinely could not explain: my HRV, heart rate variability. The single clearest signal of how well our system is actually recovering from stress was alarmingly low. The DEXA scan told me my strategy was working, but my nervous system was quietly waving a red flag that I almost missed. It was a massive reality check that I still have plenty of work to do. That's our next episode, centered on data from my Aura Ring experiment and the healthy stress numbers that shocked me. While the DEXA scan showed the recomp, my smart ring showed me the systemic cost. And it turns out the days I thought I was just pushing through it were the ones quietly costing me the most. I'll see you next Thursday.